Hello, this video is the first in a series that will be exploring the relationship between culture, our social imagination, and the risks of agri-food, this mixture of agriculture and the food industry. We'll begin this discussion with a consideration of a concept offered by Ulrich Beck, a social theorist, called the Risk Society. And the Risk Society claims that we're living in a time where it's increasingly difficult to understand the consequences of our actions. Before modern times, most problems were somewhat localized and immediate, uh, but with modernity and the increasing complexity that has accompanied modernity, our ability to understand where problems are even coming from is greatly diminished. Because we've introduced a lot of new factors to the environment. Uh, Different chemicals, for instance, have become sort of insidious, found in our soil, in our water, in our air. And the origin of these chemicals is sometimes obscure. It could be agriculture, it could be some industrial process, manufacturing, it could be a household product. And the consequences, people develop health problems like cancer, uh, developmental disorders, uh, epilepsy, those kinds of things have been linked to different chemicals, for instance, found in the environment. So we live in this time where we just don't really have the ability to stay on top of everything that we're creating in the environment and therefore in our society. Now, when it comes to agriculture, there's quite a bit here that fits within this risk society concept because we've introduced a lot of new technologies in agriculture, such as biotechnology or genetic modification. So these really advanced innovations that have come about through our understanding of DNA and its manipulation, uh, the introduction of different types of hormones into milk production or meat production and animal use, animal agriculture, the widespread use of different pesticides, and our lack of understanding with regard to hydrologic systems, where our water is going to come from, how are we going to water crops for the distant future. Now, there's even some question about how we'll maintain current levels of irrigation at the rate we're going. So the question is, what are the risks of adopting these technologies without understanding the nature of these technologies or their potential consequences? Now, further complicating this issue is another concept offered by Michael Carolyn called epistemic distance, which essentially means that we're removed from some kind of immediate reality. So, how many people do you know that actually work on a farm, are employed in agriculture, or own a farm? So, there aren't many people who are actually living in this reality. And with so few people living in that reality, uh, our understanding of agriculture is very limited. So, that raises the prospect that we'll be gullible. We'll Our risk tolerance will be pretty high because we're not really aware of or even concerned about these different technologies that could be damaging to us. And that's further complicated by the fact that risk aversion is constantly under attack by the manufacture of doubt, largely coming from different corporations, agribusinesses who profit from these technologies in agriculture. So the question here is, since so few people farm, who will muster the awareness or the amount of concern necessary to deal with agricultural issues and to form policies to deal with them? A useful book on this, The Merchants of Doubt by Reskes and Conway, shines a light on this phenomenon. And they really look at science that has been used as a tool not to enlighten, but to sow doubt and to distort facts. And they, for instance, look at the tobacco industry and the way that that industry would hire scientists to essentially just create doubt in the public, about the linkage between tobacco use and cancer or heart disease, for instance. And although there was plenty of research supporting evidence for those links, as long as you had a few scientists challenging those studies and perpetuating this idea that the case is still open, people could continue using tobacco products with less concern. Then, once we say something is proof, well, then the case is closed. But really, this goes to the nature of science itself. Science is always open to being challenged, and that's something that the public has always struggled to grasp, because the public really wants confidence coming from science. They want to be told that something is scientifically proven, and that is quite rare, if not impossible. So the question here is, how can we ensure a realistic public understanding of the risks of agriculture in the face of this distortion and doubt campaign coming out of industry? Uh, Ending this discussion, I turn to the thoughts of a philosopher, pragmatist named John Dewey, who really uh, provided some useful thinking on this topic of expert knowledge and its place within democratic process. And he wrote a book called The Public and Its Problems. And in that book, kind of painted the difficult situation that we're in. He said that a lot of the issues we need to deal with in our democracy are of a very complex technical nature that few people actually understand. Right? So it's difficult to discuss and debate something that few people actually have the education required to have those discussions. So how can you have a democratic debate? How can you have the public participate, in these kinds of discussions when they're not educated enough on the nature of those issues or the kind of public risks they pose? So this implies we've got to have some kind of deference to experts, to the ones who understand these problems. How many people actually are versed in the science of DNA? Not many, right? Certainly not in the public. So we have to defer to experts in these fields. But doing so, if we're not careful, could actually create a technocracy where the experts are making all of the decisions. So Dewey, I think raises a pretty important point here. How we reconcile an uneducated public when it comes to very complex issues. How do they take advantage of expert knowledge without just deferring to these experts and allowing them to write all the policies, which is not democratic. So Dewey had a few prescriptions for this. He said what we need is free and clear communication between experts and the public. So we need to have some kind of forum where experts can make the public more educated on these complex issues, like genetic modification, or outside of the agri-food context, issues like hydraulic fracturing, which became hot button public topics, but the public had little education about. Dewey also advocated the exclusion of propaganda and manipulation. So the very things we were just talking about, the merchants of doubt, corporations engaging in disinformation campaigns, or other actors, not necessarily corporations, even governmental bodies, trying to mislead the public, essentially, to create doubt. And Dewey advocated debate, informed by experts, but with full public participation. So what that looks like, I'm not sure, but certainly this provides a map to something that's maybe better. So, our question, we're not answering these questions. We're just, laying it out there. So is this even possible? How do we have this integration of expert knowledge with public discussion? And what are the alternatives if that's not going to succeed? All right, thank you.